And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. We're brought to you by our friends over at Preborn. You guys have been so grateful, so generous to them, and they are grateful for that. This partnership of the last few years has saved, we think, tens of thousands of lives. And you guys know the drill by now. It's tax deductible. It's a 5-star charity. For as little as $28, that's it. $28, you could save a life maybe as soon as today. That's all that ultrasound costs. That doubles a baby's chance at life by convicting mama not to murder her own offspring. So if you want to make that $28 donation today, maybe some of you can do more because Preborn does do more than that. They're there for the mom up to 2 years after the baby is born. They don't just say, hey, thanks for choosing life and then go about their merry way. No, they're invested now in this new family. And so they're there with practical needs like diapers and car seats, intimate needs like counseling, for example. And all of that is of no cost as well to this new family, although, of course, none of it is actually free, and that's where we come in. So keep it going. You guys have been so gracious. Let's keep this train a-rolling at preborn.com/Steve. Again, that's preborn.com/Steve. All right, coming up on today's show, for fake news or not, we are going to touch on a topic that has been kind of taboo on our side over the last few weeks. I've generally referenced it a couple of times, but only on this show, and on purpose, I've not even addressed it online. I'll explain why I've not mentioned it online at all. But it's a bit of a taboo topic, but I think now, as we continue to see more and more of this person show up in the Epstein files, I think now maybe we need to have a conversation here about should it continue to be a taboo topic or not. All right. So we're going to get to that for fake news or not. We're basically the ombudsman our own selves and our own peer group here at the bottom of the hour. Because again, I'm also not eagerly diving into this and delving into the connection of this individual with Epstein myself, but I'm starting to think now that this has escalated to a point maybe it's got to be addressed. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll talk about that here next segment. Top of next hour, Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen is going to join us. He only sued the Biden regime over 60 times the last 4 years. And so he's going to give us an update on the latest in the lawfare happening around the country and also preview this upcoming debate that our colleague and friend Ali Stuckey is having. I believe it's this week, right? Maybe it's tonight. Is it tonight? The 17th?
I knew it was coming up this week.
Yeah, I know it's this week. I think it's tonight, the Texas Attorney General debate. So that is a national story, man, which is why I spent months trying to convince my best buddy.
Yep.
It is tonight. Okay. I spent months trying to convince my buddy Chip Roy stop being a backbencher in Congress and take a job where he can go on offense. And he finally agreed with me. And now he is the front runner in that race. He'll be at that debate tonight. So we'll preview that. And then Pop Culture Tuesday, Disney has canceled gay days for the first time in decades this year. And it's the reason why that I think there is and it speaks to what I have been talking about for years with things like the NFL. So we're going to get into that for Pop Culture Tuesday, coming up in the final segment of the show. But before we get to all of that, of course, we must first get to Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Another Week, another trainee terrorist. 2 victims were killed, 3 others hospitalized with life-threatening injuries, and the suspect was dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound Monday after a man opened fire during a high school hockey game in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Court records show Robert Dorgan had been involved in multiple disputes with relatives in recent years, including allegations that tensions escalated after he underwent meatball surgery because he was a man who believed himself to be a woman. Dorgan, 56 years old, is accused of opening fire inside the Dennis M. Lynch Arena in Pawtucket during a hockey game between Coventry and Blackstone Valley schools in what police described as a quote-unquote family dispute. The news comes barely a week after the Canadian trans shooter in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, killed 8 and wounded 25 there. According to Gallup, only 9% of the total population of the United States identifies as quote-unquote LGBTQ, but nearly 1 in 4 18 to 29-year-olds claim this identity, 3% of that age range claiming to be the opposite sex. There's no data for 56-year-olds. In the case of Dorgan, his social media seems to indicate he was a fan of certain right-wing influencers and politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nick Fuentes, and Tucker Carlson, Thomas Massey, to name a few, and espoused overtly anti-Semitic views. The quote-unquote trans community is without a doubt the most dangerous and unstable population in the Americas, and only an equal level of madness and delusion allows them to continue theirs. In completely unrelated news, here's Congressman Tim McBride, who himself believes himself to be a woman.
And a strong man's greatest asset is scarcity. When there is scarcity in jobs, when there is scarcity of opportunity, they pick boogeymen, or in this case, boogie people.
Moving on, Jesse Jackson, a fixture in Democrat politics for decades, passed away overnight at the age of 84. His family says he passed peacefully. As the United States continues moving military assets in and around the Middle East, President Trump says,
So I'll be involved in those talks indirectly, and they'll be very important. We'll see what can happen. It's been typically, Iran's a very tough negotiator. They're good negotiators, or bad negotiators. I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential. And we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. I think they want to make a deal. I don't think they want the consequences of not making a deal. They want to make a deal.
Meanwhile, back at home, Democrats continue to telegraph their midterm election strategy. Here's Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear.
How do you respond to a Democratic voter who might say, I like you, I like your track record in a red state or red Commonwealth, but you're too soft-spoken?
Well, first, yes, that message is working. Look at Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, who ran great campaigns in races that should have been structurally difficult. And they both won by double digits. You know, the DGA and our candidates are winning everywhere. For me, I believe that the American people want stability, that Donald Trump is exhausting. Many Americans feel like the pendulum swung too far during the Biden administration, and it swung way too far during the Trump administration. And what they want is an America where they can wake up every morning and not be worried about its future.
And finally, we go once more to the well. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
We look at what happened in Venezuela, for example. It is not a it is not a remark on who Maduro was as a leader. He canceled elections. He was an anti-democratic leader. That doesn't mean that we can kidnap a head of state and engage in acts of war just because the nation is below the equator.
Yeah, the only thing below the equator is that woman's IQ. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Patriot Mobile. They've been on the vanguard of the red parallel economy from even before we all thought, we really need this thing. And they are also an outstanding product. I mean, listen, our own family. We have been Patriot Mobile customers now for almost 6 years and have never looked back. You get premium service on all three major networks. You can switch at any time you want for free. For example, we've got an upcoming trip to Israel. Called up my rep over at Patriot Mobile, found out that the current network we're on has a bunch of add-ons to account for international texting and data, which I never had to look at before because I'm not much of a international traveler. And so, my rep was like, you know what, we're just going to switch you to another network just for now. That won't affect your price really all that much at all, but you'll save money because you're not getting all those add-on charges. And then when you get back, because you like that network because of where you live locally, we'll just switch you right back. Just switch you before you go and switch when you get back. 2 switches in a week and a half. Can't beat it. That's just excellent customer service. It's an excellent product, and they put what you invest in them, they reinvested back into the values that they share with you. All right, so make the switch today. Keep your number, switch your number, keep your phone, upgrade your phone, whatever you want to do, they'll make it happen for you. And even if you're locked into a terrible contract with a communist company, they've got buyouts as well that might help you get out of that. All right, PatriotMobile.com/Steve is where to go. Use the promo code Steve to get started with a free month of service at PatriotMobile.com/Steve. Use the offer code Steve for a free month of service at PatriotMobile.com/Steve. All right, let's get to Aaron's montage. And I'm going to read something to you. The question of life is the question of the 20th century. Race and poverty are dimensions of the life question, but discussions about abortion have brought the issue very much into focus in a much sharper way. How we will respect and understand the nature of life itself is the overriding moral issue, not just of the black race, but of the human race. The question of abortion confronts me in several different ways. First, although I do not profess to be a biologist, I have studied biology and I know something about life from the point of view of the natural sciences. Second, I'm a minister of the gospel and therefore feel that abortion has a religious and moral dimension that I must consider. Third, I was born out of wedlock and against the advice that my mother received from her doctor, and therefore abortion is personal for me. From my perspective, human life is the highest good. Human life itself is the highest human good, and God is the supreme good because he is the giver of life. That is my philosophy, and everything I do proceeds from that religious and philosophical premise. Life is the highest good, and therefore you fight for life using means consistent with that end. Life is the highest human good not on its own naturalistic merits, but because life is supernatural, a gift from God. Therefore, life is the highest human good. Life is sacred. Biologically speaking, thousands of male sperms are ejaculated into the female reproductive tract during sexual intercourse, but only once in a while do the egg and sperm bring about fertilization. Some call that connection accidental, but I choose to call it providential. It takes 3 to make a baby: a man, a woman, and the Holy Spirit. In the abortion debate, one of the crucial questions is, when does life begin? Anything growing is living. Therefore, human life begins when the sperm and egg join and drop into the fallopian tube, and the pulsation of life first takes place. From that point, life may be described differently: an egg, embryo, fetus, baby, child, teenager, adult, but the essence is the same. The name has changed, but the game remains the same. Human beings cannot give or create life by themselves. It is really a gift from God. Therefore, one does not have the right to take away that which he does not have the ability to give. Some argue, suppose the woman does not want to have the baby. They say the very fact that she does not want the baby means that the psychological damage to the child is reason enough to abort it. I disagree. The solution to that problem is not kill the innocent child, but to deal with her values and her attitude toward life, that which has allowed her not to want the baby. Deal with the attitude that would allow her to take away that which she cannot give. Some women argue that the man does not have the baby and will not be responsible for the baby after it's born. Therefore, it's all right to kill that child. Again, the logic is off. The premise is that the man is irresponsible. And if that is the problem, then deal with making him responsible. Deal with what you are dealing with, not with the weak, innocent, and unprotected baby. The essence of Jesus' message dealt with this very problem, the problem of the inner attitude and motivation of the person. If in your heart was his central message, the actual abortion effect is merely the logical conclusion of a prior attitude, the cause, that one has toward life itself. Deal with the cause, not merely the effect when abortion is the issue. Some of the most dangerous arguments for abortion stem from popular judgment about life's ultimate meaning, but the logical conclusion of their positions is never pursued. Some people may unconsciously operate their lives as if pleasure is life's highest good and pain and suffering man's greatest enemy. That position, if followed to its logical conclusion, means that which prohibits pleasure should be done away with by whatever means are necessary. By that same rationale, whatever means are necessary should be used to prevent suffering and pain. My position is not to negate pleasure nor elevate suffering, but merely to argue against their being elevated to an ultimate end of life. Because if they are so elevated, anything, including murder and genocide, can be carried out in their name. Often people who analyze and operate in the public sphere, some sociologists, doctors, politicians, etc., are especially prone to argue in these kinds of utilitarian ways. Sociologists argue for population control based on the scarcity of housing, food, space, etc. I raise 2 issues at this point. Number 1, it is strange that they choose to start talking about population control at the same time black people in America and people of color around the world are demanding their rightful place as human citizens and their rightful share of the material wealth in the world. And then second, people of color are for the most part powerless with regard to decisions made about population control. Given the history of people of color in the modern world, we have no reason to assume that whites are going to look out for our best interests. Politicians argue for abortion largely because they do not want to spend the necessary money to feed, clothe, and educate more people. Pardon me. Here, arguments for inconvenience and economic savings take precedence over arguments for human value and human life, kind of like, we don't have to prosecute a satanic child sex ring because the Dow's at 50,000. Would that be a little bit like a sidebar? Anyway. I read recently where a politician from New York was justifying abortion because they had prevented 10,000 welfare babies from being born and saved the state $15 million. In my mind, that raises serious moral questions when politicians are willing to pay welfare between $300 to $1,000 to have an abortion, but will not pay $30 for a hot school lunch program to the already born child for those same mothers. I think the economic objections are not valid today because we are confronted with a whole new economic problem. The basic and historic economic problem has been the inability to feed everyone in the world, even if the will were there to do so. They could not produce enough to do the job, even if they wanted to. An agrarian and disconnected world did not possess the ability to solve this basic economic problem. That was tragic, but hardly morally reprehensible. Today, however, we do not have that same economic problem. Our world is basically urban, industrial, interconnected, and technological, so that we now, generally speaking, have the ability to feed the peoples of the world, but just lack the political and economic will to do so. Psychiatrists, social workers, and doctors often argue for abortion on the basis that the child will grow up mentally and emotionally scared. But who of us is complete? If incompleteness were the criteria for taking life, we would all be dead. If you can justify abortion on the basis of emotional incompleteness, then your logic could also lead you to killing for other forms of incompleteness, blindness, crippleness, old age. There are those that argue the right to privacy is of higher order than the right to life. I do not share this view. I believe that life is not private, but rather it is public and universal. If one accepts the position that life is private and therefore you have the right to do with it as you please, one must also accept the conclusion of that logic. That was the premise of slavery. You could not protest the existence or treatment of slaves on the plantation because that was private and therefore outside of your right to be concerned. Another area that concerns me greatly, namely because I know how it has been used with regard to race, is the psycholinguistics involved in the whole issue of abortion. If something can be dehumanized through the rhetoric used to describe it, then the major battle has already been won. So when American soldiers drop bombs on Vietnam and melt the faces and hands of children into a hunk of rolling protoplasm, and in their minds say they have not maimed or killed a fellow human being, something terribly wrong and sick has gone on in the mind. That is why the Constitution called us 3/5 human, and then whites further dehumanized us by calling us the N-word. It was part of the dehumanizing process. The first step was to distort the image of us as human beings in order to justify that, which they wanted to do, and not even feel like they had done anything wrong. Those advocates of taking life prior to birth do not call it killing or murder. They call it abortion. They further never talk about aborting a baby because they would rather imply something, that would imply that something is human. Rather, they talk about aborting a fetus. And fetus sounds less human and therefore can be justified. In conclusion, even if one does take life by aborting the baby, as a minister of Jesus Christ, I must also inform and or remind you that there is a doctrine of forgiveness. The God I serve is a forgiving God. The men who killed President John F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. can be forgiven. Everyone can come to the mercy seat and find forgiveness and acceptance. But, and this may be the essence of my argument, suppose one is so hard-hearted and so indifferent to life until he assumes that there is nothing for which to be forgiven. What happens to the mind of a person and the moral fabric of a nation that accepts the aborting of the life of a baby without a pang of conscience? What kind of person and what kind of society will we have 20 years hence if life can be taken so casually? It is that question, the question of our attitude, our value system, and our mindset with regard to the nature and worth of life itself, that it is the central question confronting mankind. Failure to answer that question affirmatively may lead us with a hell right here on earth. Jesse Jackson wrote those words on the 4th anniversary of Roe v. Wade in 1977. Does that sound anything at all like the Jesse Jackson that is being commemorated today? Does that sound anything at all like the Jesse Jackson that you recall, that you remember? How do you reconcile these words with the Jesse Jackson we do recall and remember? We cannot. It's beyond our ability to do so. Which is why that is probably being reconciled in eternity as we speak. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
You know, I'm reminded of Jonathan Cahn's work. He reminded us on the show multiple times and in his books that after the demons are exorcised, if they're allowed back in, they will come back 70-fold to forsake wisdom like that and to go in the direction that him and along an entire movement went. Reminded in the same montage with this news is another trans killing and the news of how many people within Gen Z identify as trans. Of course, just yesterday we were talking about also within Gen Z, there's more people who actually will, under no circumstances, entertain a gay wedding. But there's the tension there. You have a civil war coming just within that generation alone. And it's because it is true. There be demons. And they have absolutely flooded the zone because of the forsaking of the good, the true, and the beautiful that you just heard Steve read from a man that you probably had no idea ever said such a thing.
The same word of God that tells us to, when it is possible, live in peace with everyone, also says, blessed are the peace livers, peace enjoyers, peacemakers. Now, there are 1,000 ways which you can misconstrue Scripture, but I think it's also fairly clear that when it's possible, we need to live in peace with those around us. But when it's also possible to make peace, we need to make that peace, but we also need to recognize when it is not possible to live in peace. Whether it's Hamas in Gaza, they have telegraphed to the world around them, to the localities around them, for years now, my entire life, it is not possible to live in peace with us. We're now witnessing over and over and over again. Per capita, I would love to see the per capita numbers of so-called LGBT, the rainbow. It's just a jihad of a different kind. Rainbow jihad violence now. The birth pangs are getting closer and closer and closer and closer together. I'd love to see the numbers per capita violence. Murderous violence. Telegraphing. It's not possible to live in peace with us. Unless, of course, you bow the knee to our pronouns. I saw this guy's social media blaming people who criticize transgenderism for why transgenders, so-called, go, quote, berserk. It's not possible to live in peace with that. When you deny one of the foundational building blocks of humanity, how God knit you together in the womb, as Jesse Jackson at one time so thoroughly understood. When you deny that, you're letting demons into your psyche. How many more examples do we need of that? We should always allow room for repentance, always. But when there is an entire subsect of people, whether it's Hamas waging jihad in and around Gaza, whether it's the rainbow jihad waging their own holy war in our midst, the answer is no. It's not possible to live in peace. And once again, I want to reset this for the 567th time. The only people crazier and more spiritually deluded than the 56-year-old man, the 18-year-old man in Canada, who believes that they are a woman and tries to act and behave as a woman. The only thing more delusional and spiritually darkened than that are the people who surround them and golf clap and say, I know this is bad. I know better than this, but I'm afraid to call it out for what it is. Congratulations. You're the most spiritually deluded of them all. We're going to have to get more bold and more bold. And if you think bold means something, it probably means something 5 times as strong as what you're thinking about. More bold in calling this out and more bold in demanding solutions. And I'm talking about if you engage in this type of spiritual delusion, it is a crime. That type of boldness. That's what we must demand. Yes, it's a good sign when there are some institutions that are outlying. They're saying, yeah, don't give the plastic surgery, the meatball surgery to minors. This has to be extinguished, full stop, this ideology. Because you're jacking with forces you don't understand.
So was Jesse Jackson in his own way. Just manifested itself differently. But the outcome is largely the same. And this is the cautionary tale of the idea that there's a deal to be cut with the forces of this world. This is the cautionary tale of believing there's such a realm as the secular. Because what I just read to you a few minutes ago is one of the finest abortion apologetics you will hear in your entire life. In your entire life. And what's also astounding about it is he was able to fit that within his overall left of center political dialectic at the exact same time. He uses their own language of justice, of the oppressed, of the marginalized. So what occurred? Somewhere along the line, he made a conscious decision that he was God and that his gifts and platforms and abilities were his to barter with and his to negotiate and his to figure out. And that his motivations were just so pure and good that he could do what he wanted and then God would just bless that. He ended up having an affair and a kid out of wedlock, ended up being largely disgraced. He's been out of the public eye for how many years? The same decisions we make on the tranny issue that Aaron was just describing. We can play God. We know better. We are the people that we've been waiting for. God's just been waiting for us this entire time, and now we have arrived. Or maybe there's no God at all. Nietzsche wasn't bragging when he said God is dead and we have killed him. He was lamenting it. And this is how, whether it's choices you're thinking of making in your own individual life. And I listen, man, I stood on the edge of that abyss and looked into it myself a couple times. So I've been where you're at. I've asked myself, is really the stove that hot? Is it really? And you need to convince yourself, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but hell's a lot hotter. But it's when we start making these kinds of calculations as individuals. In Jackson's case, he made these calculations in his life as an individual, with ambitions, urges, and it ended up consuming him. And at the end of his life, he looks nothing like that which made him a transformative figure in his younger years. Didn't finish his race well. Or the decisions we make as a society now. Until we ban and criminalize these surgeries, many more innocent people are going to die. Because Aaron is right. These are cosmic forces we were not meant to tinker with, and the cost is lethal. We think for a while we're going to get away with it. And we think this because God is merciful and mercy triumphs over judgment. But it does not cancel a judgment, and Jesse Jackson learned that this morning. The judgment is not canceled. It is not. And if you think triumphs and cancel, if you conflate those terms, if you conflate them, you end up in the middle of Todd and I's ongoing year-by-year argument of whether you can lose your salvation or not. An argument that has literally been raging since the beginning of the church. It's been arguing from the beginning of the church. Can we lose our salvation or not? Do we have eternal security or not? The goal is to not be the reason why we're having that argument. The goal is to stay on the narrow road. The goal is to finish your race. And when we don't do so as an individual in Jackson's case, or as a society as we're doing in the tranny madness case, the consequences can be devastating, not just in this life, but in the next.
The Steve Deace Show.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show. And we are powered by our friends over at SelectQuote. For over 40 years, SelectQuote's been one of the most trusted brokers in insurance, helping more than 2 million Americans secure over $700 billion with a B in coverage. Their mission, it's simple: to find you the right insurance policy for your unique needs. That's why they shop, so you can save. And unlike other one-size-fits-all life insurance companies, SelectQuote's licensed agents, they work for you. And they do so in as little as 15 minutes. And they're going to compare policies from top-rated carriers to find you the best fit for your health and your budget. And again, they work for you for free. No medical exam, no problem. They partner with providers that offer same-day coverage for up to $2 million without needing a visit to your doctor. Maybe you've got a pre-existing condition, high blood pressure, diabetes, even heart disease. They've got partners with policies designed for those as well. All right, so get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at selectquote.com/Steve. That's selectquote.com/Steve. All right. Let's get to some fake news or not. And I forgot to ask this question earlier. How many times does Steve Bannon show up in the Epstein files? Let me search the Epstein file database that's out there, because this is kind of a taboo subject on our part right now. All right. Over 1,700. Over 1,700. How many times does Bill Clinton show up in the Epstein files? So over 1,700 for Bannon. For Bill Clinton, about 1,200. Now, we don't have any photos of Bannon hanging out in the spa with, what looks like women of problematic origin, as meaning that, like, where'd they come from, how'd they get there, why are they there, right? We do know some of the women that Epstein trafficked were prostitutes doing this consensually. We do know this. We also know that there were several of them were not, right? So there's been a kind of a taboo subject on our side, and I want to address it not because I think we're like more principled in this arena or above it all, but because we have largely been engaging. And I know on this stuff, stuff like this, you guys will just follow my lead, and I appreciate that. Okay, I do try to give you guys extraordinary freedom, and even some of my own friends have come and complained to me about the amount of freedom I give the two of you. Okay, all right. So I do try to give you guys extraordinary freedom. I think overall, I mean, if I'm not comfortable putting people on my own payroll who say things I don't necessarily agree with or wish maybe wouldn't be said at a given time, I'm not sure how that fundamentally makes me no different than the very people that we call to a higher standard. Then, what do you not agree with, or what do you find uncomfortable at a given moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hold myself to the same standard that we are trying to lobby for and advocate for. And then there are matters where we get into sensitivity issues on our side, or, real serious relationship stuff. And you guys will typically know to follow my lead, and I appreciate that. And so as a show, as a unit, the three of us, we've loosely addressed this previously, but haven't seriously discussed it as a show, haven't really seriously got into it over social media. And here's the reason why, all right? Because again, the buck always stops with me. It's my name on the show. I have no personal regard for Steve Bannon at all. I have never met him. We have several mutual friends and enemies, okay? People and they're sometimes they're aligned, sometimes they're not. Sometimes I have friends who despise him, and he has people who despise him that like me. Okay, the closest I've ever come to interacting with Steve Bannon is I was on his show when Congressman Chip Roy guest hosted it in the summer of 2024, and Chip thought it would be a good idea to have me come on and personally make the case for evangelicals that supported DeSantis in the primary and were hesitant about supporting Trump in the general. And I believe this is before Trump got shot. Okay. For me to come on and make the case of why they should do that. And I did. and then his team, Bannon's team, or no, this would have been after Trump got shot because Bannon was already in prison then. I think he was sentenced for 6 months, right?
Mhm.
Wasn't it shortly before Trump got shot that Bannon went to prison? I think it was shortly
I'll trust
before.
your timing on that. Yeah.
And so I made that case, and then Bannon's team edited me out of the podcast archive of the show. So there's I think no record of me ever appearing on the program. He spoke when Jim DeMint's group had me come out to sub in for Charlie. So I was asked to speak to DeMint's group. That's the trip you went on with me in September in D.C.
Yeah.
And I was asked to fill in there at the last minute and to fill in for Charlie. And this was scheduled before he got shot, but he just could not make it. So I was asked to come and fill in for him, and then he got assassinated. And Bannon spoke before me via Zoom. So he was not there in person. That's it. We both worked with Naomi Wolf during COVID. He did more closely than we did. They even wrote a book together and did some excellent work. And I think I even said at the time, Bannon was doing one of the few shows on our side that was telling me things about the scamdemic I did not already know. So anything else that we've ever said publicly or anything these last few years, we've had really no interactions?
No.
Okay.
That's over the target.
All right. So I disclose all that to you guys just so you guys have an idea. You can judge our own personal motivations, situations, or the like. I had great respect for him for a willingness to go to prison for what he believed. I also know people who know him well who, don't necessarily find him as somebody they have a lot of trust for. So opinions vary on all of this. But overall, would it be fair to say overall that his overall body of work has been at least a net positive to the American right in the last decade?
I'm not sure I know enough to say that definitively.
Oh,
I think that
all right.
I think
okay,
which is why we're having this conversation. I think.
Yeah.
At least that's not based on anything you've told me, because you've told me nothing about this.
Yep.
Just how we
and on purpose, I didn't want us to pre-plan any of this. I wanted because I want us to wrestle with this as a show in real time, and I want the audience to sense that as they tune into how we are wrestling with it.
My perception is, and my preference is, that Bannon is not somebody I necessarily want to be enemies with because we have enough in common, at least from the outside looking in.
Yep.
That's kind of where I land on this.
But not necessarily anybody that you find. I really would like to just hang out with that dude and get to know him better. Is that
Something
fair?
like that. Yeah.
I think that's a pretty apt description about maybe my own feelings on the matter. Okay.
And also, as it applies to me, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole, but I've seen from enough sources that he is connected in the very recent news to this Catholics for Catholics.
Yeah.
And so I have some questions.
This is the one that's trying to make Carrie Prejean Tertullian.
Yes, and it's obviously Candace.
And Candace Owens is Joan of Arc.
See, that's no.
Yeah.
Some blatant Islamophobia there.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, as recently as like a year ago, I mean, Bannon was as absolutely pro-Israel as you could possibly get. So, but again, we believe in the biblical principle of you don't muzzle the ox while it's treading its grain. We know that we're an acquired taste. Probably lots of people in our industry don't like us, but maybe respect the work we have done. And so I don't have to be your friend and I'll stay out of your way. That's kind of how we felt where he's concerned, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good analogy.
But now over the weekend, intimate communications between Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein all the way into, and we're up to 2019 now. I read over the weekend. I was reading them. 2019, including how to triangulate against Trump, how to use the 25th Amendment, which is what the left was using a lot at the time during the Russian collusion hoax. And overall, there's been a lot of quiet on our side about this, and we've been a part of that quiet. Again, I'm not elevating us. When I think that we're doing something better than our peer group, I'll tell you, I've done that in the past.
Absolutely.
This is not one of those times. All right, we have made all the calculations that most of our peer group has made, and to test that, I asked Grok this morning how many people have posted or published content highlighting, or at least highlighting, if not criticizing, the amount of the massive volume of mentions of Bannon and the Epstein files. I did watch the entire interview they did with Epstein, by the way. I did. We even talked about that at the time. I didn't think it was the most fawning interview either. I think I said that.
Right.
Okay. All right. Here's what Grok told me. Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire are the most prominent ones that have extensively posted and dedicated episodes and content to Bannon's voluminous mentions and communications in the Epstein files. But Grok notes that this is kind of an extension of their public feud at the moment. Those two camps, right? So with all due respect to Ben, and I've got people at Daily Wire I like, okay, too, but there's a feud going on there, so it'd be kind of easy to dismiss that they're the ones that have kind of taken him on, right? Okay?
Got it.
Because maybe there's something personal there, right? Or if you were a Bannon stan, you could dismiss it with that.
Yes.
Okay. But here's what I did note. Grok mentioned that Fox News and foxnews.com has covered this and mentioned it online, in print online and on the air. And I also found it fascinating that Fox mentioned that Breitbart, where that's Bannon's old haunt, where he took over after Andrew Breitbart, that they also are one of the few exceptions in covering this and making notes of it. Beyond that, Grok goes on to say, no prominent evidence shows other major conservative podcasters or outlets have brought any of this up. And it mentions as examples Tucker Carlson, Tim Pool, Steven Crowder, Matt Walsh. Like, for example, Crowder would be a very pro-Israel guy in complete opposition to what Tucker is doing. So you can't just say, oh, it's the woke right people. It's not. It's a broader coalition of people that have not addressed this or brought this up. According to Grok, I don't have a chance to listen to all these shows, so I don't know.
One I think that deserves mention. I don't know where she is on the podcast rankings or anything like that, but she has 1.2 million followers.
Oh, Dana?
Dana Lash.
Dana Lash,
she's
for
been
sure.
doggedly
Yep.
reporting
And
on
of course,
this.
she would have worked with Bannon at Breitbart and would have known him very well from those days. Okay. So, am I being as fair as possible and as objective and accurate as possible so far?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then the question then becomes, all right, for us now, everybody else can do their own shows, has their own reasons. I mean, I still find at least 50 to 60% of what Tucker is doing as content very valuable to my overall worldview. It's the other stuff that I'm finding, and not even like disagreeable, like I'm finding it like nihilistically dangerous. Okay. So to me, Tucker's like Harvey Dent at the moment, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's a flip of a coin. All right. Are we going to promote Islamic simp, tropes and talking points and nihilism, or are we going to try to save America today? Okay. I think Candace is just a completely satanic force of no value whatsoever. And then the rest of these people, I've been on Tim Pool's show. I agree with a lot. Don't disagree, or I disagree with somebody. They were great to me. You guys know I'm a Matt Walsh stan. Okay. I've been a fan and appreciative of his work. I think he's been as valuable of a warrior in terms of what he's done in cinema, what he's done with his own activism, and then his own content as we have had on our show, or I mean on our side in this era, I would say. Okay. Right. So it's not as simple as there's a particular wing that won't say anything. None of us are really saying anything except for, and to be fair to Ben would have also worked with Andrew, with Bannon at Breitbart, so would have had a pre-existing knowledge of what he's really like there too, along with Dana. Right. My point being that it's not, right now, the Venn diagram of those who are saying that Erica Kirk killed her husband and, everything is the Jews is about 100%. That's not even a diagram. It's just an overlapping circle of people. It's all the same exact people, right?
Yes.
We're not saying that all the people that are anti-Zionist are claiming Erica Kirk killed her husband. We are saying all the people claiming Erica killed her husband are anti-Zionist. That's 100%er, right? Okay.
Seems fair.
Now, but in this coalition of people that have been kind of standoffish about Bannon, that's not as seamless of a garment whatsoever, right? So I think a lot of people without, and on purpose, I've not texted some of the people that we mentioned that I do know. I've not asked them because I wanted us to have as objective a view, unfettered and uninfluenced as possible. I kind of think that maybe a lot of people maybe just organically made kind of the same calculation we've made here, right? Listen, I'm not eager to give up our soldiers to the enemy, right? Even if they're not necessarily the soldiers I want in my unit and they scare me, okay? I'm not eager to hand over the guys wearing our uniform to the other guys.
Right.
Period. Just in warfare, you don't typically win by handing your own soldiers over to your enemies, right? Okay?
Right.
But there are times though where your own soldiers become such a liability they're aiding and abetting the enemy too, right? That can happen as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't think until this weekend, some of the stuff I saw, that even if it made you uncomfortable, and it made me uncomfortable, even if you found it unseemly, I did. All right. Even if you're like, what is this? Okay. You know, and I did. I didn't think it was worthy of considering handing a soldier over and saying, yeah, that this is court-martialable. Okay. But when we're talking about well into 2019 now, and you're working with Jeffrey Epstein on how to counter-message the Trump presidency, I kind of feel like we're maybe reached a point where maybe the Joint Chiefs need to get together and say, hey, you know, that troop regiment over there that we kind of knew was a little squirrely but was doing what we want them to do, we got to take a phone call, rein them in here a little bit. You see, is at least fair to broach this subject now? What do you guys think?
Well, yeah. Otherwise, quite frankly, we are sliding down a scale that makes us look like Pam Bondi. I mean, either, you know, this if we look into it, everything falls apart. It's almost a direct quote. Yeah. Well, that applies to this situation. It applies to our analysis of Dan Bongino, who doesn't seem to be the same kind of analysis now that he's come back to a show as he was in the past. Are we really about the things we claim to be about, and therefore are we going to go there? Are we going to ask the questions? So yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, yeah, if the way you phrased it right there was perfect. And if we're uncomfortable with that and we don't ask the questions, we are guilty of a lot of things that we've been complaining about. And when I say we, the whole movement you're talking about,
the collective we.
This collective we.
Yeah.
We're collective.
We should do it in the future. Are we talking about we just as a show, we as a platform on the Blaze, or the collective we as a movement?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got some kind of chunk of wood in our eye that makes our questioning of Pam Bondi a little questionable.
There's a spectrum here. Elon Musk has said over and over again, quote, Bannon is evil. And then there's notable people who have not said anything about this whatsoever. I know that when some of the first forays of Bannon's communications with Epstein came out in December, I'll be honest with you, I was like, let's just get to Christmas break. Just get to Christmas break. I saw that. I'm serious. I was at the park with Ben. I was like, just to get this Christmas break. I was saying, yo, regardless whether or not the silence is because, you know what, we need to tolerate this because he does a lot of good work, or I'm afraid of him, or whether you're just going to go all the way over there, I think it would be healthier than not to ask questions and maybe even demand answers as we move forward.
All right. As we move forward, we'll strive to do that then. Hour 2 is next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. You can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can do that by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. You can subscribe to our new YouTube channel. I think this is about our 9th attempt to start a YouTube channel, and I'm slightly exaggerating only. At Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then we'll have more on that here in a minute, by the way. You can also, if you are a podcast subscriber, make sure that you hit subscribe, or on Apple iTunes, follow. And that's how you're going to know for sure that every time we do a new episode, you're assured that it's going to be right there in your podcast feed. Many, many of you have done that. We are appreciative of that. Tens of thousands of you have left us 5-star reviews. We appreciate each and every one of those. You can do that on your podcast platform of preference here today. You can also, by the way, support our friends over at MD Hearing, because they want to be supportive of you. MD Hearing is concerned when they see things like hearing aids for $8,000. And when you see things that essential getting cost or priced out of the market for too many Americans in this day and age. And that's why MD Hearing was created. They deliver high-quality, rechargeable digital hearing aids for just $297 a pair. That's over 90% less than what a traditional clinical hearing aid cost. How do they do it? Well, it was a company created by a medical professional who saw how his patients needed the hearing help but they were too often unable to afford it. So he wanted to fix the system, and that fix is MD Hearing. So get big savings right now with a tiny hearing aid from MD Hearing. Go to shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code Steve. You'll get a pair of hearing aids for just $297. Plus, they're adding a free extra charging case that's a $100 value just for being a part of our show. That's shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code Steve. Get this special offer right now. All right, and make sure to use my promo code Steve so they know that I sent you. At shopmdhearing.com, promo code Steve. At shopmdhearing.com, promo code Steve. Well, we are increasingly seeing that the battles that we are waging for the soul of this country are often culminating in the courts. And I'm not shy at times about airing the frustrations that I share with many of you about inaction, for example, from the Republican Congress and things of that nature. But one place that's too often overlooked, where we do have an absolute fleet of superstars who are going on offense against the spirit of the age, is with a lot of the Republican attorney generals around the country. It was Republican attorney generals that got Anthony Fauci under deposition, for example. I've just been so impressed with the overall work that I've seen Republican attorney generals accomplish that I spent half of last year lobbying my good friend Chip Roy to leave Congress and go home and succeed Ken Paxton as attorney general. Now we're going to have an attorney general debate tonight, hosted by our friend and colleague Ali Stuckey and the Republican Attorney General Association. I don't know that we've ever seen anything like that before. Chip's going to be a part of that as he's one of the candidates there in Texas. Austin Knudsen is with us. He's Montana's Attorney General. He oversees the Republican Attorney General Association. He's our guest now on the program. And Austin, it's good to have you with us here on The Blaze. Welcome aboard, brother.
Great to be here, Steve. Thanks.
So you were kind of a busy guy the last few years. You sued the Biden regime over 60 times. Over 60 times. Now, listen, I did a show for 2 hours every day that was like the Book of Lamentations every day when those guys were in charge. But even I thought, wow, that's a level of initiative that might surpass even my own, brother. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
What was so unique about that administration and the way it was constructed and its purpose that many theaters of battle were available?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we saw out of the Biden administration is, I mean, regardless of who was pulling the levers, whether it was Joe Biden himself or, as we all suspect, probably his handlers, it was just an onslaught every day of new rules and regulations, bypassing the Administrative Procedures Act, bypassing public comment, bypassing the people, and just shotgunning out rule after rule after rule. Anti-energy, anti-Second Amendment, anti-West. I mean, frankly, Montana, we're a very Western state, lots of federal land, but I mean, we're an ag state, we're an energy state, and we just saw these left-wing coastal elites just seem to want to go to war with us and our way of life. So, I mean, I was happy to do it. Had I had a handful of more lawyers, we probably would have filed more lawsuits. But yeah, we were over 60 in 4 years. So we're pretty proud of that.
What is it? You know, I'm not going to ask you, that's not your job, but I did express a level of enthusiasm for your ranks in our party, greater than I've expressed, and frankly, many of our voters have expressed for other ranks currently in our party. What is it about you guys in those state attorney general roles that maybe you've got maybe a little bit more of vigor in going up against our opposition that we've seen, sadly, and too many other cases in the Republican Party, unless it's Donald Trump himself doing it?
Well, we have teeth. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. Look, being the attorney general is a great job. It's a job I would stay in if I could. I think bang for your buck, to if you excuse the parlance, we can do a lot. Obviously, state law is different in each state, but for instance, in Montana, I've got pretty broad latitude. I'm the state's chief legal officer. I'm also in charge of consumer protection. I'm in charge of a lot of law enforcement functions. That gives me a lot of latitude to be aggressive, like I like to be, and like a lot of my colleagues like to be. And I think that's probably the best thing is that just in the last handful of years, especially within the Republican AGs Association, RAGA, you've got a bunch of really conservative, but also really aggressive leaders who just aren't afraid to hit back at a federal government who's just doing things that was out of control under Joe Biden. And the complete lack of communication and cooperation from the Biden administration, complete juxtaposition of what we got going on now with Donald Trump. It's night and day difference. So much better now.
If I'm delving into an area where you're like, that's not my job, feel free to just go ahead and smack my hand back, okay? But I see this through a unique prism in my line of work because one of my best friends is a member of Congress who's now going back home to run for AG as we speak. So I've seen both sides of this equation, right? And I wonder sometimes if being up there in Congress and you're in this isolated community of Washington, D.C., and sometimes putting a human touch on things, most of the time it's a good thing to have that perspective. Sometimes it can blind you to what people's real motivations are and soften you at the same time, right? Okay. And so you're up there with these people and, every now and then they bring the kids they didn't abort up there with them, on, take your, non-binary child to work day, right? And you're like, hey, these people are just like us and you're seeing each other in the hallway, right? You guys aren't doing that, right? You guys walk into a court of law and it's very clear in many cases that you're up against people that don't care what the law is, that the law is what we want to do. And we'll just judge shop to just affirm that, right? And I just wonder if, in this case, you have an advantage in not being in personal contact in D.C. with a lot of people on the other side, and so you're just looking very soberly at what they're actually claiming and then what they're willing to do to act upon said claims without any of that kind of emotional, camouflage at all. Am I onto something at all here, or is this just stupid?
No, I think you absolutely are. Look, I'm a former member of our state House of Representatives. Look, it's not Washington, D.C., but we all know there's a bubble there. There just is. When your life revolves around that Capitol building, whether it's the state Capitol or the U.S. Capitol, that tends to be all you can see. I love being in the AG's office because we've got direct contact with our constituents. I travel around the state. I got a pretty good finger on the pulse of what's going on, and we can be very responsive. We have a saying within the Republican AGs: congressmen talk, Republican AGs act. Mm-hmm. And that used to be kind of tongue in cheek, but I think it's especially true. And that isn't to say that there aren't good members of Congress up there. There's fantastic members of Congress. We've got a couple of really good ones in Montana. But it is a fact that we can be a lot more nimble. We can get into court quickly and we can get results fast. And I think we showed that during 4 years of Joe Biden.
How much of what you guys there at the Republican AGs Association go up against every day? How much of it is what we would view as a wrong, but not intentionally malevolent misinterpretation of our Constitution and way of life? And how much of it is just Palpatine-esque, I will make it legal kind of stuff? Hey, this is what we want. It's what we think. And we're just going to do it by hook or by crook. What would you say the ratio of unintentional, not intentionally malevolent, but disagreeable matters you go up against and intentionally disagreeable? Like deconstruction is the point. How often do you think that's the case?
Well, certainly during Joe Biden, it was like you used a Star Wars term after, fellow geek right here. It very much felt like you were dealing with the emperor. It was intentional. It was malevolent. I literally had to task a full-time staffer just to keep an eye on the Federal Registry, the new rules being put out every single day by the Biden administration. And that was simply because they knew they did not have the votes in Congress or even the Senate to do what they wanted. So I'll juxtapose it. Versus what we see now under the Trump administration, there's communication. We're not getting blindsided by things, malevolent or just misinterpreted. We're actually in communication with those agencies before they do this stuff. They're taking our input. Hey, it's the Forest Service. You have a lot of national forest in your state. We're thinking about doing this. What do you think about this? That is just a wholesale different mentality than what we saw under 4 years of Joe Biden. So it really has changed a lot now. dramatically in the last year. I just can't overstate that.
Can you see that sometimes in their filings and their reasonings where you're like, listen, man, I went to law school with this dude. We don't agree on anything, but I know he's smarter than this. Like, this just doesn't even, I mean, you're just retconning an outcome here and trying to put a, legalese on it to make it, sound pliable, but you're not even attempting to line up with the premise of our way of life here. This is just easily debunkable because what you're trying to do is, frankly, dissemble our way of life.
Yeah, I mean, so many instances, but I mean, the one that comes to mind, and it's kind of a wonky one, I'll be quick, but I mean, we had an issue with federal grazing. That's a thing in Montana. We've got a lot of federal land, and under historic federal law, that grazing preference goes to livestock. And that's a defined term in federal law. Well, you had a giant 501c3 international monstrosity trying to run buffalo out on federal grazing. Well, that's illegal. And they tried to get around that by creating this term in rule, indigenous livestock, which doesn't exist anywhere in federal statute. They literally just tried shoehorning this in because they knew it was in flagrant violation of 100-year-old federal law. So, I mean, that's just one example. But yeah, all the time.
That brings us to this debate tonight. I can't recall, and I'm a junkie. I enjoyed this as content growing up. I was an Alex B. Keaton wannabe. I can't recall an attorney general debate like what you guys are putting on tonight, and our friend and colleague Ali Stuckey is going to host. I mean, is this unprecedented? Because I can't recall anything like this before.
Well, I certainly have never seen it. I mean, I've been the AG for only 5 years, but I'm not aware of RAGA ever having done this, or any other organization for that matter. Look, Texas is incredibly important to the Republican AGs Association. Texas is incredibly important to the nation, especially in Republican circles. As Texas goes, the country tends to go. I have a very small office, Steve. I mean, I don't have a ton of lawyers. You know how important it is when I can pick up the phone, call my friend Ken Paxton and say, hey, Ken, you got more resources than I do. Can we partner up on this? And maybe you guys carry some of the water here. That's incredibly impactful. And Texas swings a big stick. And so this is a very important office for the Republican AGs. But we got 4 candidates, and we want to make sure people know who these candidates are. We want to make sure they get a good audience, a good blast out, and thanks to the Blaze and your colleague Ali, we're going to have a fun evening, and I'm really looking forward to it.
And let's face it, Ken's leaving big shoes to fill, and it's fascinating because he's following the traditional career track. I mean, when you excel at that era or that in that office, you end up advancing to where it looks like he's likely headed right now, perhaps the U.S. Senate. But on a day-to-day basis, and this is the conversations I had with Chip a lot of last year, on a day-to-day basis, I mean, it wasn't just victories for Texas, but because, as Sonia Sotomayor sadly proved to be right, that the federal circuit courts are where legislation is made nowadays. I mean, he was striking mighty blows on a daily. I live in Iowa. I mean, our show's all over the country, but I mean, I could feel his impact where I live, right, and way more than my typical congressman in Iowa on a given day. And so these are huge shoes, not just for the state of Texas, but really for the country. Who does inherit that position is going to be on the front lines of the battle.
It's absolutely true. I mean, again, members of Congress, and unfortunately, a lot of times the Senate, they do a lot of talking. Sometimes they can do some good, but it's a proven fact that Republican AGs, we can move quickly, we can be aggressive, and we can do things. And you are 100% right. AG Paxton has done a fantastic job with that office. His staff is phenomenal. They're incredibly helpful, and they're a huge laboring oar for us when we're talking about big national multi-state lawsuits or letters that we're doing, legal research. They just carry a ton of water for us. So Texas is extremely important, and we are really looking forward to showcasing all the candidates here tonight.
So that debate's going to be tonight in Dallas, 7:00. The 4 candidates: Joan Huffman, Mays Middleton, Aaron Reitz, and Chip Roy. And Allie's asking the questions, man. So none of these are going to be, what's your favorite color or what's your favorite team GOP talking point? Not going to. Nope. These are going to be probably some of the toughest debate questions people have ever seen asked. So this will be worth a watch tonight for sure. All right, that's 7 o'clock again tonight. All right, while I've got you, if you'll indulge me on a personal level here, because this letter just came across my desk here like 20 minutes before you came on. So a bit of a pleasant surprise, and you're signed on to this. And this is a letter from my state attorney general, Brenna Bird, asking YouTube about censorship of conservatives, my show in particular, and some of the things that we documented with First Liberty when we filed a comment/complaint to the Federal Trade Commission last year. And 16 AGs agreed to sign on to this. The aforementioned Ken Paxton there in Texas, Stephen Cox in Alaska, Todd Rokita in Indiana, Chris Kobach in Kansas, Tim Griffin in Arkansas, James Uthmeyer in Florida, Raul Labrador in Idaho, Liz Murrell in Louisiana, Catherine Hanaway in Missouri, Mike Hilgers in Nebraska, Drew Wrigley in North Dakota, Gentner Drummond in Oklahoma, Marty Jackley in South Dakota, Alan Wilson in South Carolina, and then last but certainly not least, sir, your signature is on this as well. So thank you very much. Can you tell me and the audience why you wanted to sign on to this and why you think this was worthy enough to involve your office?
Well, this is a passion play for me. I mean, there's no question about it. And first of all, credit to your AG, Brenna Bird. Brenna is one of my favorite colleagues. She's an absolute rock star. And for you folks in Iowa, we have got to get her reelected. That's going to be a big one for us. But look, YouTube is a behemoth. They have basically what amounts to a monopoly on what is today the public square, and that is online content. YouTube is a huge player. There's some others that try to pop up and compete, but they summarily get squashed. We see conservative content consistently censored down by YouTube. Steve, I'm a big gun guy. I'm a huge 2A supporter, but I'm also just like a technical gun nerd. I like getting on and watching gun videos, how to disassemble, how to clean, how to tweak, how to fix. We see so many of those channels that have been around for a long time on YouTube, being deplatformed, being demonetized, being just flat shoved off the platform because YouTube doesn't like guns and they think guns are yucky. And so they've taken upon themselves to just censor those channels. I have a real problem with that, and especially when it comes to conservative content. We look at the talk radio space. That's certainly been dominated by conservatives. I mean, we're giving the people what they want. And as much as YouTube doesn't like it, there is a large demand out there for conservative content. And when they start putting their thumb on the scale and deplatforming people, censoring people like that, we're going to push back. So I was happy to sign on to Brenna's letter. High five to her. I'm telling you, Iowa, you have got a conservative rock star for an AG in Brenna Bird, and you've got to reelect her. Donate to her campaign, help out, but for heaven's sake, support her and get out and vote.
Amen. And the thing is, in my case, it's punitive. Right. Maybe you didn't like what I was saying during the scamdemic, despite the fact, as far as I know, I'm the only person that wrote 2 bestsellers, fully sourced and footnoted, and not one of those footnotes or sources was ever cast any aspersions, was ever proven to be false, not a single one, and about 700 pages of content. But fine. People could even disagree at that particular heightened moment of our culture. Fine. But Austin, this has continued now for years after the fact. We've had to restart this channel on multiple occasions, all right? And it's just very clear that this is a punitive attempt to do something like this. When I can do a podcast for fun in my basement, all right, my son and I get on I have a YouTube channel called Michigan Podcast. We just do it for fun, my 19-year-old son and I. We get on after a Michigan game with no graphics, nothing, and just sit in the basement and talk for 20 minutes about the football game. And that can get 40,000 views. And a show on one of the largest alternative media platforms in America, okay, struggles to get 5? There's just no rational explanation for anything like that other than this has to be punitive action.
I think it's absolutely correct. And look, I'll cut right to the chase. I mean, YouTube is playing with fire here. I think Republican AGs have shown we're not afraid to bring an antitrust lawsuit. And if that's all they're going to understand is being punched in the mouth, well, I mean, I guess we'll have to do it. I'm getting really tired of this. We've written a couple of these letters now. I did one for a content creator in my own home state of Montana a few years back. That helped for a minute. But I think we're just going to keep seeing this consistent throttling down, or like you said, just flat out deplatforming.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. It's 100% ideological and political. And look, like I said, they are the town square nowadays, and I think it begs the question: when a company like this owns the town square, do they have some obligation to make sure that the First Amendment is accessible to everybody? I think the answer there is yes. But we might be looking at some antitrust monopoly litigation here.
Well, you guys there, thank you again. Thank you personally for signing on to that. Echo your words about Brenna as well. We were all frankly shocked here about, what was it now, about 10 months ago, when I know the Trump White House was also shocked when she decided she was not going to run for governor. But I think a lot of it is because she's doing the job that she actually has always wanted and loves. All right. And so thank you individually and your 15 colleagues for signing on to this and hopefully getting some answers. I just want my content to be seen and unshackled. All right. I'd be totally satisfied if the largest video platform in America, or really in the history of this planet, wasn't censoring me anymore. I mean, think about the fact we've grown like 400% on Apple in the last 6 years. And I mean, we have had almost zero line growth on YouTube. You can't reconcile that. And so we're going to need to bring out the big guns. That's you guys. I mean, you guys have kind of been the Navy SEALs of our party the last few years. So thank you, brother. Really appreciate it.
We're glad to do it.
All right. And then we'll be watching tonight. Should be an interesting event. Thank you, Austin.
That's going to be a great event. Tune in, folks. Right. 7 o'clock right here on The Blaze.
You got it with Allie. Thank you, brother. God bless.
Thanks a lot.
You bet.
Good talking to you.
You bet. So I just got this on my desk about 20 minutes before we began that interview. So I've not even had a chance to read the entirety of the note yet, even myself. But from what I can see, just skimming in here as we were bringing Austin on, and then First Liberty reached out to me, and I was doing this while we were introducing Austin. Hey, we're going to put out this out of a press release. Can you give us a quote on this? So I was trying to do all of that while getting prepped for Austin. But I mean, this is serious artillery from what I can read here. This is like, hey, these data points. And essentially, Brenna and the co-signers are saying here, you have to prove to us that what Deace is alleging here is not right. You have to factually prove this is wrong, because there's just not a rational justification for a growth curve on Apple that goes like this and a growth curve on YouTube that looks like this and then just goes like that, right? Goes down and then flatlines for the exact same era and the same period of time. What is the rationale of justification for that? And so, you guys know we love data. We don't run from the truth here. We like the truth. We like sunlight. So, like we said when you and I wrote Fauci and Bargain, we put in more footnotes than pages. What did we say the whole time when that book was getting released? Prove us wrong.
Yeah.
Find the footnote in here that's incorrect. Tell us what's wrong here.
Never happened.
Never happened once. All right. If that's not my social media data, by all means, YouTube is welcome to show 16 attorney generals of the United States of America that I just completely made it up and drew these numbers out of my butt, and that's not actually what's happening to us. Let's find out. They've got weapons to find out that we frankly just don't have.
And one thing I like about our guest, it looks like when it comes to the age-old distinction about getting to a certain station in life, like representing this National AG's committee, do you want to be somebody or do something? What stuck out to me that he's a do-something guy is that during the Biden administration, instead of waiting until the bloodshed was on his front porch, when he said, I assigned one of my attorneys just to constantly be looking at what the feds were doing, instead of waiting, he's going out to the edge of his property on behalf of the citizens that he represents Montana. He says, we're watching this whole time. You're not sneaking anything by us. And as soon as you step 1 foot over this line, we're coming for you. That is absolutely the attitude we need to have nationally. I also like how he talked about how relationships work amongst AGs, not just when you're getting together for coffee or junkets or whatever, but it's like, hey, man, Texas, you guys have a lot more guns per capita than we do. How can we get together on this? This is clearly a man who understands the times we're living in and is ready to roll up his sleeves. And like he actually used the term, if someone needs to get punched in the mouth, so be it.
That's the attitude we need to have nationally, locally, county level. Because if the doctrine of lesser magistrates were carried out to that extreme that we've seen a number of these state attorneys general carry out, then this thing would be far more fortified than it currently is.
Mm-hmm.
Red America would be far more fortified than it currently is. You would have far more buffer between, oops, we accidentally let a left-wing a wolf in sheep's clothing in, like Rob Sand here in Iowa. You'd have a lot more buffer if that was the attitude nationally, locally, at the local level. I've never said this before. I do not mean this to be self-serving, which is why I'm not going to name exactly what I'm talking about here. But for the past 2.5 years or so, I've been running an experiment myself with YouTube. I wanted to find out if it was daily, fresh, original content every single day fed into YouTube, not even video. If it was just fed into YouTube and I told nobody about it, there's no external stimuli whatsoever feeding into this, and I just did my best to search engine optimize this. I've been doing this for 2.5 years. Pretty big data set sample size. I just wanted to see what the algorithm would do by itself. Not telling anybody about this whatsoever. For the first 6 months or so, 50, 60 views. Just by the algorithm by itself. I believe the first time I used a title and description that included the word tranny terrorism or tranny violence, something like that, never got more than 3 or 4 after that. 3 or 4 views per episode after that. Until one time, randomly, last week, I saw a 30,000% increase on one particular video. It was the first 10 minutes incredibly critical of Pam Bondi, hitting her from the right. I just...
That is thumb on. That's not even thumb on the scale, brother. That is body slam in the scale.
So, and this is demonstrably provable. I think it was maybe they gave me a buffer of 2 or 3 times I used like tranny madness or transgender violence or transgender terrorism. And then after that, it was just nothing. Nothing. We're not going to give you anything until you hit a member of the Trump administration to the right. Then we'll give you a 30,000% increase one random day. I'm sure that's just coincidence.
What you just described is punitive action. That's what you just described. It's one thing to censor me like this during the scamdemic and claim that what I'm saying is not certain. We don't know the fact yet. We're years past this, and to continue doing it, it's punitive in nature. More in a moment.
The Steve Deace Show.
We now have our regularly scheduled tossing the camera and the mic over to Todd as he waxes poetic about our partner Cove Pure. Since I let him and his family have the product last year, it's still in your home, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So tell us, how's it perform?
Well, we joke a lot of times on the show if when you go off script sometimes, and the people who send in the scripts are looking at it and say, oh my goodness, what's happening here? I hope that's not the case with me because, like I said, my family is trying to break your product and we can't. This thing is used so much for the hot in the winter and for the cold, and now in the winter with the hot. I drink hot tea. My youngest daughter drinks hot chocolate. They're constantly working out throughout the entire year. If a family could possibly put in the effort to break this thing, my family has, and we can't. It's reliable. It's easy. It looks good, as Steve said before. It fits right in like a coffee maker would. So I don't know what else I could say at this point other than I don't know exactly how we would function as an Urban society if we did not have it anymore.
They have clear wave technology inside the Cove Pure that is certified to remove up to 99.9% of contaminants, pretty much anything that isn't water, PFAs, microplastics, pharmaceutical residue, fluoride, All of that gets removed, and it's the purest water you can get. Cove Pure makes it so easy to get pure water just with the push of a button. Even Todd can do it. So make sure that this is the year that you get your family healthier than ever. Improve your health with cleaner water. Right now, you can get $200 off for a limited time if you use my link at covepure.com/Steve. That's COV as in victory, COVE, covepure.com/Steve is where you can go. And you'll save $200 off your Cove Pure for a limited time at covepure.com/Steve. All right. We have had discussions on this show pretty much since the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, which, can you believe that was a decade ago now? Holy cow.
It's been a spell.
That was the fall of 2016. It was a decade ago, right? Off and on about should we boycott? Can we boycott? What's an effective boycott look like of these massive, just monasteries of mausoleums of pop culture? All right, they're relics of Americana that have all become captured institutions, or many of them have become captured institutions by the spirit of the age, or at least to some degree, feel as if they've got to at least placate them, right? So news came out yesterday that Disney has not been funding the gay days. They put it on the official Disney calendar. It has been a sanctioned event. It has been a promoted event internally, but it's always been funded by corporate sponsors. Okay? And it's not that Disney could not fund the gay days. We're talking about one of the most profligate, even with all the depreciation of its stock over the last decade or so, we're still talking about one of the most profligate corporations in the history of free enterprise, right? All right. Disney could easily. This is just a distinction without a difference. It's how you avoid, accepting all of the liability. Well, we're just having a day at the park, and these other companies came in, because remember the Southern Baptists tried to get these canceled, I think, when they first started in the 90s. The Southern Baptist Convention tried to boycott Disney to get them to stop and was not able to. So this is the first time in, I think it's over 30 years, that there will not be officially Disney-sanctioned gay days at the park. It's likely that, within the rainbow jihad community, they'll, individually get together and still do their thing and get, and take advantage of freedom of movement in our country and freedom of association to kind of do something that will still, and they'll promote that within their social media channels. And a bunch of you will email me in June and say, I thought these were canceled. Well, I mean, you can't ban the gays from going to, the park. Okay. So that's not what we're talking about here. This was something that was associated with Disney for quite some time until now. And the reason being given is the corporate sponsors pulled out. And as we now finish the program with this week's Pop Culture Tuesday, I think that there is a lesson here, especially because it coincides with my strategic reading of all of this. And as we look at the intersection between what's trending in pop culture and what we're trying to conserve as to what's good, true, and beautiful for the human condition, revealed both in real time and then also throughout history. That's what we're trying to conserve. And if you apply this to what's happening right now with the NFL, which is an even more profligate monolith than even Disney at the moment, I think the same thing still applies. It sounds great and noteworthy that you're going to get 30 million people. I mean, the most viewed television in America are NFL live sporting events, not just the Super Bowl. In any given year, if you looked at the top 20 Nielsen programs in America, probably about half, minimum, are associated with the National Football League. The NFL draft will outdraw the NBA Finals. The draft will outdraw the NBA Finals in terms of viewership. So it sounds good that millions of people are just going to stop, as our colleague Orrin McIntyre describes it, they're just going to stop watching the sports ball because they're morally frustrated, but that's just not how human nature operates or works. That does not mean that these things are...
That's not how pagan human nature works.
Well, I would argue human nature in general does not work like that. There's almost no successful examples of this when something gets to this kind of level. But we can have that conversation too. That does not mean these things are invulnerable or impervious to pain. But you have to be very strategic. All right? Maybe the most successful boycott in American history was the Montgomery bus boycott. Were the buses the only thing in Montgomery, Alabama that were racist, do you think, at that time? They were the only thing that was racist?
They were not.
They were not. So we're going to boycott the entire city of Montgomery. Not feasible. So where are they weak? Where are they weak? Where are they weak? We're going to stop buying tickets to NFL games. That's actually not the biggest. The tickets are gravy. It's the television revenue from what they sell to advertisers. That's what drives all of this. And that's why they can afford to make the tickets so expensive. So it's largely just the corporate partners of their own sponsors that can afford them. And so you insulate yourself. You create your own economy of scale to try to insulate yourself from the Todd Urzens of the world. Because the critical mass of the Todd Urzens it would take to penetrate that bubble is very difficult to achieve. Maybe not impossible, but pretty darn close. But bubbles pop. And one of them popped yesterday. And this is why I'm an advocate for looking for the thermal exhaust port. To me, there's two separate conversations here. If the conversation is too many guys are obsessed with this at the detriment of their own manhood, then keep having that conversation, and I don't disagree. But to use that as a vehicle to then we're going to reach a critical mass of guys who are going to wake up before the country's over and force the NFL to its knees, I just don't think that math adds up. I don't. I think that's why I think there is a bifurcation there. That being said, that doesn't mean they're invulnerable. And when you can find the weak spot, and this is something we've done very good. I think of Robbie Starbuck in Tennessee. He's been one of the people leading this, going after all these corporations for DEI and everything else and making them famous. Just about every commercial in the Super Bowl 2 years ago was for an electric vehicle. Now, I kept falling asleep during this year's Super Bowl, so I did not see nearly the level of commercials as I typically do. But, Aaron, how much did you end up watching?
Oh, very little. I mean,
Okay.
we had the small group over, so there were a million kids
we had our
running around.
Yeah, we had our whole family over, and we were loosely following the game. And so I barely watched it when they were all over, and then when they all left, I kept falling asleep because the game was boring me. But during the season, the amount of ads for electric cars precipitously down. Yes. Why? That's the pressure point. They were trying to push that on you. They were trying to use the NFL to get you to buy an electric vehicle as a vehicle towards imposing a social credit score. Hey, we're just going to turn your car off. And you go to plug it in. We don't like what you posted here last night. The problem is many of the sponsors of the NFL cannot create the bubble for themselves that the NFL can. Many of the sponsors of Disney Gay Days cannot create the bubble for themselves that Disney can. The kinds of sponsors it takes for Disney to risk its corporate reputation for 30 plus years with Gay Days is not Acme paper towels. It's major corporations, many of them publicly traded. And there will be a few who are all bought in on the agenda, but there'll be others who aren't and think they're just doing it, because they don't want to get protested and they want to look like good corporate citizens. Until the backlash means we're not buying as many Norelco razors as before. And all of a sudden, Norelco pulls out. Well, we can't do this anymore. Can't be associated with this anymore. And then that's when the monolith, Disney, says, well, now we're without protection. Without your sponsorships, we can't deflect off the Todd Urzens, we can't deflect from the Steve Deace show when they come at us. Hey, man, it's a free country. We can't ban the gays from coming. We're not funding it. They have sponsors. They're out of the ground beneath them. Their feet has shrunk. They're out of plausible deniability. Could Disney make gay days happen this year without a single corporate sponsor if they wanted to?
Yes.
Yes, they could. And they probably want to, if we're honest. But they can't. Because now, mutual assured destruction, hey, they can't come at us because then they'd come at all of you. Well, the all of you looked at them and said, what do you mean we, Lone Ranger? We're out. Came out of the closet, we're going back in. And that's where you need to find the thermal exhaust ports. What are the weak spots? Who can you go after? And I think that is the lesson here, is it is an idealistic message to say to parents, you're stupid if you give Disney any of your money. But it's not as if there's 15 other content creators out there in this space producing we're trying. I mean, dude, Angel's David movie is one of the better animated films I've seen so far this century. But, you know, we don't produce the volume of content. Not to mention, a lot of Disney's content prior to the last 10 or 15 years, we all would have considered to be some of the finest family-friendly entertainment of Americana, right? Okay. Yeah. So am I hating America if I go have my kids watch, you know, the original Snow White, not the new one that lost $200 million, right? We can all get into that. But right now, we don't have a vector that is producing the volume of content it would take to replace all the content of that library. We just don't have it. And we can sit there and say you shouldn't watch the NFL because it's making you emasculated as a man. And for a lot of men, that is very true. But that's separate from, are we going to defeat what they're doing? And I think that requires more strategy than idealism. Because they've created a bubble for themselves to overcome our idealism. The problem is the people that are funding that entire bubble don't have nearly the bubble themselves. You don't hold Norelco razors in the same regard as you do the NFL or Disney. They're not entertaining you. They're not giving you the dopamine hit of the heartfelt story or the favorite team wins. There's no emotional connection there. Right now, somebody in our office, like a regional VP at Norelco, said, dude, why are we catching strays? What did we do? First name that came to mind of a company. I don't even know if you've sponsored any of this. My bad. All right. I tried to think of a name of a company everybody would know, and I have no idea why Norelco razors came up, but here we are. But you got to find what the weak point is. And that's why Disney's not having officially sanctioned gay days today. The thermal exhaust port was found. And I think that's the lesson of all of this. All right, gentlemen, we've got about 3.5 minutes. Your thoughts?
Well, in going after that thermal exhaust port, at least implied in all of that, is the thing that we absolutely cannot do is go against the 400-pound gorilla that is the idolatry of the American people. I don't, again, if every issue is ultimately theological, and if it is revival or bust, that's not ultimately a game we can play and win. If the biggest thing is the idolatry of the American people that we simply can't defeat, we got some other questions to ask about what revival or bust even means. Because I don't think it's a separate issue about what football as an idol or what a lot of things as an idol are doing. If we're just admitting we can't defeat it, it's too big, like what does the story of Josiah even mean to us? It's got to be a both and.
I tend to agree with that take. However, I don't think there's necessarily any tension between what Steve is laying out and what Todd just admonished as well. You do have to be strategic because the idolatry is as big as it is. We need as much strategery as we do Leroy Jenkins, if you catch that analogy when we're taking on these behemoths. Leroy Jenkins, I'm not going to explain that. If you know, you know.
Yes.
But storming the fortress along with a plan once you actually get inside the fortress, or even better yet, before you storm the fortress, unlike Leroy Jenkins. Dude was very, very brave, but also didn't have a plan. So I think that's kind of how you have to look at these things. We need at least as much strategery as we do bravery, and absolutely no cowardice. That's not even a consideration, obviously.
We're going to have more on pop culture in the overtime. There's a video that has gone viral, essentially attempting to make a $200 million budget action film on a $200,000 AI budget, and how it looks compared to what you're typically used to seeing up on the big screen, and how it doesn't. And what does that mean? And is there a moral principle here or not? Because what I'm fascinated is the people that are the most boycott Hollywood. I mean, this is a dagger. What I'm looking at right now, this is a dagger to Hollywood. And yet, some of the same people that want Hollywood to take one right in the chest are against this at the exact same time. So this is another fascinating moral quandary that we are in. We'll get into that in the overtime for subscribers. For the rest of you, back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, and right here on Blaze TV. Until then, Romans 8:28, go hard.